Hey guys, do you want to know 10 best UFC fighters of all time? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about top 10 best UFC fighters of all time. Welcome to Epic Top 10 YouTube channel. Before we get started, please make sure you watch the video until the end, so you can find 10 best UFC fighters of all time, and also subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you can get notified anytime we upload a new video. In this list, we have featured the 10 best UFC fighters of all time. The records listed for each fighter are the records of MMA, not only the UFC. It is important to note that the record for each fighter to follow is in accordance with WLD, i.e., victory, defeat, and tie, respectively. The Ultimate Fighting Championship started out simple when UFC 1 was held at McNichols Sports Arena in Denver, Colorado in November 1993. Since Zuffa acquired the UFC in 2001, the sport has grown to extraordinary proportions, thanks in large part to the success of the reality show The Ultimate Fighter. There are so many good fighters who would not fit into a top 10, but it's worth mentioning just a few that could be here. Such as Vitor Belfort, Lyoto Machida, Ken Shamrock, Mark Coleman, Rich Franklin, Cain Velasquez, Quinton, Rampage, Jackson, Vanderlei Silva, Antonio, Minotauro, Nogueira, Dan Henderson, Frank Mir, BJ Penn, and Frankie Edgar. So, here we go, the 10 best UFC fighters of all time. Number 10, Tito Ortiz. Number 10 on the list of best UFC fighters is Tito Ortiz. Tito shines to this day in his illustrious career in MMA. The rivalries boosted the UFC to unprecedented levels and allowed the organization to grow to the current proportions. He has notable victories in his cartel: Vanderlei Silva, Vitor Belfort, Ken Shamrock, Forrest Griffin, and others. He won the heavyweight belt at UFC 25 and defended him 5 times until he lost to Randy Couture at UFC 44. Number 9, Rashad Evans. Rashad Evans started his career as a lightweight, before moving on to heavyweight, to participate in the Ultimate Fighter 2 where he defeated Brad Imes in the final. Evans would win his next 4 fights to include a win over Stephan Bonnar before a tie with Tito Ortiz. In his next fight, Evans defeated Michael Bisping before knocking out Chuck Liddell with a thunderous right hand that earned him the 2008 knockout. But it was against Forrest Griffin that he got the heavyweight belt. Great fights against great fighters made him an MMA legend. Number 8, Jose Aldo. Number 8 on the list of best UFC fighters is Jose Aldo. The current featherweight UFC champion, Jose Aldo has never been defeated in the North American competition. His only defeat occurred almost 10 years ago in a Brazilian competition called Jungle Fight. Since then, Aldo has torn apart the WEC and UFC Peso Peña divisions. He is currently commanding an 18-fight winning streak that goes back almost a decade to invincibility. Number 7, Matt Hughes. During his time at the top, Matt Hughes put together some of the most amazing accomplishments the UFC had ever seen. Hughes was an All-American twice in wrestling at Eastern Illinois University. This experience served him well during his time in the octagon. Hughes won the UFC Heavyweight UFC Championship at UFC 34 against Carlos Newton. Then he made 5 consecutive title defenses against the division's best opponents. It was to lose the belt 3 years later to BJ Penn. 10 months later he recovered the title defeating the powerful Georges St. Pierre in UFC 50. Number 6, Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell is the current co-leader in all-time knockouts at UFC with 13. It is an honor he shares with Randy Couture. Liddell debuted at UFC 17 and fought his entire career with the company, being the exception to some of the fights. Liddell lost his first title fight against Couture, but he won the heavyweight belt in a rematch 2 years later at UFC 52. He would successfully defend the title 4 times, recording another win over Couture and one over Tito Ortiz in the process, losing only for Quinton Jackson at UFC 71. Number 5, Jon Jones. Since joining UFC in 2008, Jon "Bones" Jones has been devastating with any fighter who came in his way. The only defeat in the Jones cartel came through disqualification by an illegal nudge against Matt Hamill in a contest he absolutely dominated. He won the heavyweight title against Mauricio Rua at UFC 128, becoming the youngest UFC champion. Since then no one has been able to take his belt into the octagon. Unfortunately, due to a car accident, he was temporarily removed from the UFC, and the title was vacated. Number 4, Georges St. Pierre. Georges St. Pierre was a dominant champion during his tenure at the UFC. He is the only fighter in history to win the UFC light middleweight championship 3 times. Despite this fact, Georges actually missed his first title shot against Matt Hughes, but would avenge that loss 2 years later after defeating 5 opponents, including BJ Penn and Matt Serra. In 2013, with 9 successful title defenses, Georges St. Pierre announced an indefinite pause in the fights due to the physical and mental exhaustion to stay on top. The middleweight title became vacant. Number 3. Anderson Silva. Number 3 on the list of best UFC fighters is Anderson Silva. There may not have been a more exciting fighter in the world than Anderson Silva when he was at the peak of his capabilities just a few years ago. Silva had won a major UFC title defense sequence with 16 consecutive wins and 10 title defenses before his landmark was finalized by Chris Weidman in 2013. Despite the recent failures and controversy over doping, he is considered by many to be the best UFC fighter of all time. Number 2. Randy Couture. Randy Couture was the first person in UFC history to hold championships in different weight classes. He is the only fighter in the history of the organization to have 5 title reigns. He fought in more title fights than any other. Known for The Natural, he won his first heavyweight championship by defeating Maurice Smith at UFC Japan in 1997. He left the UFC and returned in 2000 to reconquer heavyweight Kevin Randleman at UFC 28. Number 1. Royce Gracie. Without the contributions of Royce Gracie, it might not be possible to have the sport as it is known in mixed martial arts. Gracie first demonstrated the capabilities of his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience when he won the UFC 1 and UFC 2 tournaments, where he recorded 7 wins per finish. There were 2 to 3 fights a night, and there was no division into weight categories, let alone rules, since fights were known as anything goes. Exhaustion prevented him from repeating his feat at UFC 3, but he made his comeback at UFC 4 with finishing wins over Ron Van Cleef, Keith Hackney, and Dan Severn. Gracie was flirted with a comeback in recent years but retired permanently in 2013. Gracie was introduced along with Ken Shamrock in the first class of the UFC Hall of Fame. So, that's the end of the 10 best UFC fighters of all time? Do you know any of the fighters we didn't mention? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you stay watching our next related video to discover more epic top 10 videos. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next video.